Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?
Well, hi again, everybody. This is Rob Godlewski with the Think Small podcast. And today our guest is Timor Brik with Data Remote. He's the Chief Operating Officer, and we're going to learn a little bit about what Data Remote does and what problems it solves for its customers. Timor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rob. Been looking forward to it.
So first of all, Timor, tell us what Data Remote does and what problems you solve for your customers.
Of course. So Data Remote is in a pretty niche industry that's been growing the last few years and commonly known as copper or landline replacement. Industry uses the term POTS replacement, which is plain old telephone service. And Data Remote's role in this market space is to help our customers do a digital transformation from their analog legacy equipment that traditionally runs over a copper landline into more digital ones. And these digital ones tend to be more resilient due to the power backup and internet backup connectivity they provide. Data Remote largely works with carriers such as AT&T as an example to help them migrate their customer base off these legacy, expensive, and aging copper networks.
Interesting. So I would just assume that this has been going on for years, and by now everybody had been already transitioned onto a more digital service from a landline. Apparently, I'm mistaken in that.
and before I joined Data Remote, I would have had the exact same assumption. So it's been easy when it comes to voice, and I think most people either have a VoIP phone on their desk, a Polycom or the sort, or a cell phone. Where the challenge is around more of your legacy equipment that utilize certain protocols. So as an example, the screeching sound you would hear on your old 56K modem, there's still modems out there, and they operate on things like remote terminals for water meters. They work on alarm panels, fax machines, traffic lights, elevators. So it's the assets you don't think about outside of a basic voice call, where we still have a stranded asset problem that operates on the copper network.
Interesting. So that's why I'm not seeing all that old infrastructure, because I'm not engaging with it on the basis.
Exactly.
Interesting. So when was the company founded, and when did you join?
Company's been around 30 years in various iterations, and I joined it's actually this week is my 11th year at the company. Started out when we were around 5 people. I think I was employee number 5.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Small company with a vision, with a founder with a vision to go out into the world and replace copper landlines with a digital solution. And our core group has grown since then by tenfold. We're around 50 people right now, based in Miami, Florida. And all of our work takes place here within Florida, as well as we have some remote employees within the United States as well. And in that time, Data Remote has explored various business segments, whether it be telematics like GPS tracking or distributing point-to-point radios. But we really found our niche, and what we started as was this POTS line or copper line replacement.
Interesting. And it sounds like you have a lot of runway or a large addressable market to continue to grow in that space, correct?
That's correct. Now, of course, when it's a retiring technology like copper landline, your addressable market does tend to decline as time goes on. However, with the past 24 months or 12, I would say even 18 months of deregulation that's occurred out of the FCC, we've seen hockey stick-like growth in that addressable market, because it's become a lot easier for the carriers or the local telecoms to sunset their landline services for a digital solution.
So that actually creates a twofold challenge for you. You've got access to much higher growth rates, but to your earlier point, your smaller addressable market is the speed of that addressable market getting smaller is getting faster.
That's correct. And Data Remote as an entity and a company is aware that, we've been lucky that we were first to market over a decade ago. which has allowed our technology to mature to a point where our deployments occur quicker, our technology stack in terms of the addressable protocols and the vast array of equipment we can address is better than any of the others out there. But of course, as the market gets smaller, or we are, replacing that existing market, we have to evolve. And so, when we look at our 5 or 10-year ramp or runway, there's other things we're going to need to do with the company, with the staff, and with the brain share that we have.
Yeah, I'm sure you have a long runway of replacing all this old copper wire infrastructure, but I'm sure that's a challenge for you as you consider what the next 5 to 10 to 20 years looks like for the business. Well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But as the business has been around for 30 years, I'm sure there's been a time when maybe sales plateaued or even contracted a little bit. Has there ever been a time like that? And how did the business navigate itself through that period?
There has, and it actually, for us, ironically, it came in the post-COVID years, because there was some panic buying that occurred during COVID and maybe the 12 months after that, where inventory, tariffs, supply chains were scarce, but we had the foresight to have inventory on hand and be able to sell, but we knew that it was a bit of a blip and we needed to prepare ourselves. Now, in that down market that occurred afterwards, or in a time of scarcity for sales, we didn't simply fire everybody like somebody, like others may have done. We actually tried to double down. And what I mean by that is we sought to gain more productivity out of the people we had. And we focused on stabilizing the product, getting the new features in place. And we recognized it and messaged it to the entire organization. This is a tight year. It's a tough year. We know what the future holds. We're not the only ones experiencing it. There was article after article of every major hardware or solution provider in their public filings and guidance saying, the 2023 to 24 years are going to be slower. And so we knew that, we knew that if we could gain more productivity from the resources we had on hand and ensure that we were ready for the next boom, we would come out on the other side in a much better position, which we have so far in 25 and 26.
That's great. So not overreacting to
exactly
current market conditions actually probably sets you up better for the growth you're experiencing now, correct?
It certainly did. We just like in life, you don't get reward instantly on the things that you do, but it eventually compounded to the fact that we are set up better today because of those actions. By not making major strategic changes that affects personnel, that affects the technology roadmap, we were able to do that. Now, with the knowledge that those times can occur again, you don't go and blow all of your money on the year that you make it. So you have to prepare and invest in future potential slow or down years.
That's a very, very wise approach. And you'll be happy to know that I hear that story a lot from other guests on this podcast, right? Not being overreactive, not rushing to adjust headcount to to current down times, if you will, and sloshing it out basically with the team you have and preparing for that next phase of growth. I think that's very wise advice and well done. But it sounds like this is now a period of that growth, correct?
That's correct. It definitely is. And it's an interesting time for us because before, sales drives everything, but sales was always, who are we going to sell to? Where are we going to sell to? What's the sales model? And now it's really about how quickly do you get your solution into these customers? So it's a deployment challenge now versus a sales challenge. The sales are there. How quickly can you activate customers?
Okay. So that growth challenge is real. And how is the business navigating, through that deployment of new technologies as you grow?
So we've been trying to get a closer grip on and just to take a step back, our business sells to other businesses. So using the AT&T example, we sell our solution to an AT&T, then AT&T is in charge of the deployment. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, we've been a little removed from the process during the time. We've injected ourselves into that process by exploring, by physically sending out people into the field to understand where the challenges are in deployments, all at our own cost. And we've been doing as much as we can on our technology stack and our development of both hardware and software features to make that deployment easier. Because the quicker you can turn a deployment into an activation, the quicker you could start gaining revenue.
Okay. So I've had a chance to look at your website, and from the novice's viewpoint, and again, I'm a very entry level in this space, so bear with me. But it sounds like it seems like a lot of your products are pretty plug and play. But I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into dealing with a customer that needs to go through this infrastructure transition. Tell us more
That's
about the process, and please correct my naivete about your products.
that's okay. Again, most people when they hear POTS or plain old telephone service or landline, they don't even think they still exist. And that's part of the challenge. So, a typical process is, let's pretend we've made the sale. Now we've scheduled a time to go to the customer site. Let's call the customer a fast food chain, and you walk in and you have to deal with the manager on duty. Your first question is, where's your telco closet? They have no idea. So
Oh,
what
sure.
so you find the telco closet eventually, and when you get in there, it's a spaghetti mess of cables. So you're really doing a site survey on your first visit, and you're tagging and you're figuring out which lines are actually in use. And a lot of the time, you're realizing that these customers aren't even using the landlines that are in place. So while there may be a potential revenue hit to us and our customers, there is a customer satisfaction aspect in that we're saving them money for their stranded legacy landlines that they were no longer using on assets that no longer exist. So that's the first thing you do. Then you get into a situation and you're dealing with maybe an HVAC that speaks a specific protocol, and the technician on site has to then adjust the device. If it doesn't have an auto detect capability, which would be to detect the protocol automatically, he would have to adjust it to the correct protocol for that equipment. They run a series of tests, make sure the line's good. Because this is a cellular solution and because telco closets tend to be these concrete rooms, they got to make sure signal is good as well. It can also work over Ethernet broadband, but we like to have the cellular there as a failover. So the deployment challenge is an install challenge. It's a customer availability challenge, and it's a knowledge challenge. You don't know what you're walking into when you walk into an elevator room or a telco closet or an apartment building with their cable mess. And that's anything that Data Remote can do to improve that process, improves it for our customers, and thus increases our activation revenue.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that education. I feel much more confident in talking about your products and your process now. So I can't imagine you're going, direct to your end customers. I'm sure you're using some type of a distribution channel to get your products and service installed at a customer's location. Correct?
That's correct. So we have around 5 or 6 channels. We're very careful about the channels we choose. They're right on our website. And if anybody wants to go see them, they're up there. And they're very strategic. We've taken time with them. They've been great partners to us in ensuring that, things like where we stage our data centers are co-located with theirs geographically, that the redundancies are built in, that the communication paths, both from a service ticket point of view, but as well as executive escalation, is there. And so we are running that channel intentionally tight. We have to unfortunately say no to a lot of business because we control our channel carefully, and try to avoid channel conflict as much as possible. And so we do rely on them and we stay close to them for them to make the sale to their end users, for them to project manage, and for them to install and service and warranty their customers.
Yeah, I love that model. I used to run a business that was sold through distribution, and you that one phrase you mentioned, channel conflict or managing potential channel conflict was my daily job at the time, and I feel what you're going through right now, my friend.
Yeah. And we ensure that there's equilibrium between that. We don't have any master VARs or anything like that. Every channel is treated
Right.
equally. When leads come into data remote for whatever reason directly, we go through sort of a round robin process or a capabilities process on distributing those
Okay.
leads. And yeah, and by
So
the
it's
way,
it's oh,
before I forget, the federal government is probably one of the biggest customers of landline replacement. They have so many legacy assets, and so we have a partner that's
I can only
very,
imagine.
yeah, and they're very slow to move off of those legacy assets. But so we have, and just to use that as an example, we have a partner whose specialty is in that FedGov space.
Okay. So can I assume then that you're doing business past the continental United States? Are you an international business?
We have not spread internationally outside of Canada.
Okay.
We would like to. There's definitely big opportunity in a lot of countries due to things like copper theft, which is a bigger deal in the rest of the world than it is here, even though it's a problem here. Copper
Interesting.
theft
Yes.
causing outages, which would then affects emergency services or infrastructure. If we were to expand internationally, it would likely be under the same model where we would partner with a local
Hmm.
telco channel who's already done the work of the regulatory compliance in that jurisdiction.
That makes a lot of sense. But still, like you said, the federal government is slow to transition their technology, as everybody kind of knows. I'm sure that gives your business a long runway of growth opportunities where you don't have to completely change your business model after all the infrastructure is changed out.
That's correct. So the business model today involves a piece of hardware that then generates a reoccurring service. So
Hmm.
you have this device as an enablement for SaaS model, if you will, and and there will come a time that the embedded base is enough where if we never sold another piece of hardware, that's okay. However, as we mentioned earlier in our conversation, there will become a natural churn over time in a lower addressable market. And so the business model or the capability features have to change. And we've done some of that. This device being redundant in order to replicate a copper landline that still works in a power outage has a large battery and it has several internet failover mechanisms. And so we actually developed this into an internet backup device, which is crucial for businesses. You ever go into a small restaurant and they say, sorry, cash only, our POS system is out.
Oh, sure.
The reason for that is that there's a power or an internet outage. If they simply had a low cost device with a monthly cellular plan, even a low bandwidth IoT plan, they would be able to continue business as is. It would automatically fail over and be able to generate that potentially lost credit card revenue. And so that's just an example of an additional feature that we were able to capitalize on from our existing technology.
Yeah, it sounds like your business is pretty far away from obsoleting itself due to a smaller addressable market with the hardware install up front and the ongoing service and support. I think you've got a nice little business here, Timor.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We have a great team. Most of them been with us for a long time, and they're excited to evolve as the business evolves too.
I love it. And what's interesting is your product line on your website is incredibly narrow. And I'm saying that in a very complimentary way. I talk to guests on this podcast that have 40,000 SKUs in their business, and I'm just thinking that is incredibly complex. How do you manage that? I see 5 SKUs on your website. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
it's very intentional. We like I said, we used to do some IoT stuff, GPS tracking. We had some of the top 5 government entities in the states, with the counties, large counties, and we decided strategically about 3 or 4 years ago that despite its revenue contribution, it became a distraction. And what
Hmm.
are we really good at? Let's focus on the thing that we are good at, the things that we are experts in, the things that we were market leaders in. And let's put all of our energy and effort into that because that's where we will thrive and we'll succeed. And we're encouraged by the number of competitors we're seeing actually come up. it means we're doing something right.
Okay. Are competitive threats becoming more of a challenge for you?
I wouldn't call them threats. We've been using the competitors, and we have actually a pretty good relationship with all of them.
Hmm.
Without naming names, I would say there's probably, out of the 50 solutions I've seen out there's probably two that would fall into a top three with us. Of course, data remote being number one, and
Of course.
yeah, and we in our conversations with them, we feel like we serve different markets. The pie is big enough for all of us, and we actually complement each other because, to use an analogy that I've used in the past internally, is, you never want to be the first flying car because nobody's going to get into the flying car. So when we released our product a decade ago, we were the first flying car. And
Okay.
the transition was nervous. Nobody really wanted to change from their copper line. You know, your and my mom and dad refused to switch over their landlines. But now that it's become more common, right? Now there's a lot of flying cars. There's a lot of data remote type devices out there from competitors. Sure. It's an easier transition. It's an easier conversation. It's an easier sale.
Interesting. Okay, good. Well, so what is the next, I'll say 3 to 5 years look like for data remote as far as growth? What's the next big step for you?
So of course everybody's talking about 5G and 6G, and we have 5G products. But with that comes, what else do you do with that? Because the 5G network's not completely built out. So, we've been working on things like creating better cellular reception. And I have to be cautious about that because it's a new product that hasn't been released yet. So it'll probably be something you'll see in the fourth quarter of this year. But it means a means for enhancing connectivity when connectivity is a challenge. So that's number one. Number two is, now that you have these devices in 500,000 or more locations, what else can you do with them? What else can the customer do with them? Can it become a smart home router? Can it become a Wi-Fi box? Can it become a device that charges other devices? Because it does have a power output to it. So, once you have the Trojan horse in place, what else do you do?
Interesting. So I'm assuming, though, most if not all of your business is what we call B2B, correct?
That's correct. Now, we have been seeing a large increase, and you'll see the public filings and you'll see the statements from AT&T specifically on the consumer landline side, which is, you and me, residents that still have landlines. There's no fiber available. They, for legacy reasons or personal reasons, refuse to get a cell phone or have a cell phone but want a landline. And there's at least, by our calculations, 10 to 20 million of those type of customers. You're not going to get all of them in terms of resident customers, consumers. But if you can even get, 10% of them, that's a good number.
Of course.
Yeah. So, and the consumer model tends to be easier. Consumers don't have the same regulatory requirements to have a fire alarm in their residence like a business does.
And they probably don't have a complicated, telecommunications box.
Exactly.
In their home that your technicians need to, or your partner's technicians need to navigate through. So I'm sure that would be a much cleaner installation once you get in there.
That's right. It's exactly. In fact, most of our consumer products are being sold as an as-is install. So you're saving on your truck roll with your technician. You're saving on your tech support time because it's very plug and play, to use your earlier term.
Well, I'm excited to see your launch into the consumer market. I'd love to see data remote boxes, replacing my my Wi-Fi router.
Yeah, it's it's a goal and it's a challenge, though. Once you get into that consumer market and you're in every Best Buy or in an Amazon store, your support level needs to go up, and maybe that's where you find specific channels that are built for that.
It is a different business for sure.
Yeah.
But the TAM, or the total addressable market, may be well worth it to investigate.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's incredible. It sounds like you've got a great, strong future just with your current business. Infrastructure replacement is needed. It's necessary, and especially when you're dealing with slow moving customers like the federal government, then you've got a good runway ahead of you.
Yeah.
Timor, is there any other piece of advice you could give, small to mid-sized businesses as they're leading their business through a period of growth?
Yeah, and it's something we've been doing actually for the last 2 years. We found it to be very valuable. We've been partnering with local educational institutions, and we've been finding a pipeline of talent that we otherwise would not have had, because the traditional hiring model in a business that like ours that involves legacy technology and digital technology results in a very small niche of people that could actually be experts in that. And what we found is that a lot of our candidates and who have become employees, their backgrounds didn't matter to us. Their education level didn't matter to us. They came in, they took initiative, they did the work that was in front of them, and they proved themselves and provided value to the business. And so for the business owners, it's make those contacts with the local educational institutions or with your local, downtown association or whatever it may be, because not only do they have the facilities and the program to get you the talent, but sometimes they have funding. We've been lucky enough that, and I'm going to mention their names because they deserve credit, Apple and Blackstone have been sponsoring students within our communities for paid internships. So Data Remote pays the students and we are reimbursed for that. And that's allowed us to have sort of a try before you buy with our hires. And and I would encourage business owners to look into those type of programs. Again, reach out to your local community college or university or local, city financial group that runs the business association for your city, and they may have those similar opportunities. Don't be afraid of retaining and recruiting local talent.
That's a really interesting point, and I'm glad you brought that up. With the implementation of AI, just literally being in every business conversation across the world right now, the concerns that business leaders have are, where are the future jobs going to be? And where they're going to be is in infrastructure and the trades. I mean, plumbers, electricians, and HVAC contractors have a huge runway for good paying, stable jobs. But you're actually in the middle of that. Your business is right in the middle of that, and you're doing that. So maybe kind of a part of the employment that is not as popular as electricians and plumbers, you're right in the middle of that. And I think that was a great point.
I agree with you. And we view, at least for now, in our current market, our current time, and the current technology available, we view the availability and access to AI as a productivity enhancer. It's not to displace anybody. In fact, we've already hired a few more people this year. Instead of using all the management books to gain more productivity out of your people, which you still should, we're utilizing the AI to do that and allowing our talent to focus on the things that they do best.
I love that you said that too, right? A lot of my podcast guests are resonating that thought, right? They're not looking to use AI to displace people. They're using AI to help their people get more productive, more efficient, and smarter.
Exactly.
And it's funny, I had one guest that said, AI is not going to replace your people that know AI are going to replace your people. So let's get our people trained up on AI and let's all become more efficient and let's all grow together. Timor, this has been a great conversation for a business that is transitioning old infrastructure and old technology. Data Remote is the place. Timor Brik, Chief Operating Officer with Data Remote. Timor, thank you so much for your time today.
Rob, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?